Hello, I wanted to share the tragic story with you about my time in New Zealand. So many of you sent me messages about how terrible it must be to be in such a faraway place, all by myself, to deal with this crazy freak accident with Milinda, of course. 3 of you even offered to jump on a plane like right now, and I said, no, that's okay. And I want to let you know I've been prompted by the Holy Spirit to share with you in detail how this was so far from being true. God made it abundantly clear to me that He was with me the whole time. I was never alone. I really felt like He held me in the palm of His hand. So let's get started. Okay, after we visited South Korea, we went on our 5-country, 5-week crazy vacation. We went to South Korea first, then to the Philippines, then we flew to Queensland, New Zealand, and then from Queensland to Christchurch. Fiona was our tour guide, and she picked us up at the airport and gave us a tour of the city, then took us to lunch, and then dropped us off at the hotel. So I should have told you from the beginning, the idea of this video is to let you know God was with me all the time. And so this was God is with me number 1. We learned about hiring private tour guides from the trip last year to Italy with the Werners. This was critical for my upcoming week, as you will find out. And then the next day, on Saturday, May 17th, Carrie, also a travel guide, picked us up at the hotel for the 90-minute drive to the boat where the Akora dolphin watching ship was. We board the ship, and since it's off-season, there were only about 15 passengers on board, and I would guess that ship probably held 40, maybe. So cheers to a fun time there with Milinda with her glass of wine after we got going. And then after that, like 5 minutes after that picture was taken, Milinda somehow manages to fall down the steps backwards on the boat. So I run over to her, see what's going on. I ask her if she's okay, and all I get is a ugh. So a woman immediately showed up and asked me if she was okay and if she needed help. And I said, yes, we definitely need help. Then 2 women and a man show up. They are all nurses. So I'm going to say that was God is with me number 2. How do you get 3 nurses on a 15-person boat, right? So she's in a lot of pain, has a big gash down the back of her head, and the 2 female nurses pretty much take over and bandage her up after I help them carry her up and put her on the seat of the boat. And the captain turns the boat around and heads us back to the dock. And then about 15 minutes later, on our way back to shore, another woman shows up. She puts her hand on my shoulder and she tells me that she is a chaplain. And she asks if she can pray for us. And of course I said yes. So that is God is with me number 3. The 3 nurses I forgot to mention was God was with me number 2. How do you get 3 nurses on a boat with 15 people? And then a chaplain to boot. So I started getting asked, pretty much at that point, do I have insurance? Well, I didn't purchase the travel insurance because of Milinda's assumed pre-existing conditions that wouldn't be covered probably anyway. So when we get back to the dock, there's an ambulance waiting for us and Carrie, the travel guide, and the paramedics take over and get Milinda into the ambulance. Carrie takes me and follows the ambulance back to the hospital, and we get a bite to eat on the way during the ambulance-to-ambulance transfer that was done about halfway to the hospital. Carrie tells me about the New Zealand ACC insurance, and that is the government no-fault insurance that covers medical costs for an accident for its citizens and its visitors. God is with me number 4. Only New Zealand has that. Good job, Milinda, deciding to have that accident in New Zealand. Okay, so So we arrive at the Christchurch Hospital, and Milinda has a new friend, Yuval, the ambulance paramedic. I later find out that this hospital is the hospital to go to in Australia, New Zealand, and the entire South Pacific. God is with me, number 5. This hospital was huge, and it was awesome. So Carrie stayed with me at the hospital all day that day until they got Milinda situated. The doctors were busy doing tests and scans and God knows what all else, and they finally got her into a room in the orthopedic ward around 11:30 at night, and Carrie took me back to my hotel about midnight. Carrie suggested that I might want to take the 20-minute walk in the morning to the hotel or to the hospital, and I thought that was a great idea. So I got up early so that I could get to the hospital by 7 so I wouldn't miss any of the doctors. But of course I did. One of them showed up at 6:30. But prepared for a long day at the hospital, I brought my laptop and set up my mobile office at Milinda's bedside. For those of you that knows me well, surprise, surprise, Milinda is in a lot of pain. They've got her on a lot of pain meds. And now she starts complaining about chest pain. So Carrie, later that day, it was Sunday, May 18th, so the hospital was kind of in chill mode and most of the doctors weren't there. But Carrie and her daughter Ruby stopped by later that evening, and her daughter brought Milinda a hand-drawn card with a picture of her cat on the front, which was very nice. And so we just kind of had to wait till tomorrow to see what the doctor said. And also, since she wasn't hungry all day, I ate Milinda's lunch and her dinner. So then the next day is Monday, May 19th. I again take that 20-minute walk from the hotel to the hospital with my laptop, get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the doctors tell us that Milinda has a fractured spine by her shoulders, two fractures. The good news was her spine did not break, so there will be no paralysis from damaging her spinal cord. And Milinda is still in a lot of pain and continues to complain about chest pains. And here's a picture of the botanical gardens right outside Milinda's window. But unfortunately, she never got to see it. So then on Monday, or later Monday, I should say, Fiona stops in at the hospital to see how Milinda is doing. It was in the morning, and she informed me that John, one of the owners of the travel guide company, is going to fly in from the North Island. We're on the South Island in New Zealand. I tell her that's not necessary, but she tells me he's already purchased his tickets, he's made up his mind, he'll be here in the morning. So it's like, okay, sure, whatever you want to do. And then Milinda, again, continues to complain about chest pain, and she continues to get higher and higher doses of pain medications through her IV every couple hours. And so Monday, again, she wasn't hungry, so I ate her lunch and dinner again. And then later, the cardiology department comes by and they start ordering blood tests to determine if Milinda has maybe had a heart attack. Milinda fusses to me about walking back to the hotel in the dark, so I call Fiona. Good old Fiona came back, picked me up, and drove me back to the hospital about 8:30. Tuesday morning, I again enjoy my walk to the hospital with my laptop, mainly along this big long park, which was nice. The cardiologist stops in and tells me that Milinda did not have a heart attack. So I'm trying to be optimistic at this point on Tuesday. Milinda fell on Saturday, that she'll be good enough shape to fly to Fiji on Thursday, and she can just kind of chill and recover in Fiji. And Milinda continues to complain about chest pains. So later that day, the cardiology department convened a meeting, and after further investigation determined that she probably did have a heart attack. So later that morning, on Tuesday, John and Fiona show up at the hospital. The cardiologist, so this is Tuesday, May 20th, so the cardiologist comes in and recommends that Milinda have an angiogram to determine if she has any artery blockages, and if so, they'll put in stents. And I'm thinking to myself, this will be great. I hope that's the case. This could explain why Milinda has had such low energy for the past several years. So the cardiologist then explains to me that the procedure is not covered by the ACC insurance, and the cost is around 20,000 New Zealand dollars. Well, fortunately, that's only 12,000 US dollars. So then I asked him, I said, what's the risk if I don't do that? And what's the worst case scenario? He said, well, she could have a heart attack on the plane on the way home and die. And I said, okay, I don't like that. Let's do the test. So he says he will schedule the procedure for that afternoon. It's like these people don't mess around. So that afternoon, the cardiology people come and roll Milinda up to the cardiology department with me in tow. Fiona and John leave the hospital for a while to get some lunch, I think. They give her the blood thinner, roll her off to do the angiogram. And she comes back, Milinda's doing okay, and I talk with her and I let her know that there were no blockages. Darn it. Then she started coughing and trying to throw up, and finally she stopped and nods off to sleep. So I go sit down, thankfully. Then a little while later, Milinda wakes up, starts coughing, trying to throw up again. She sounds awful. So one of the nurses goes over to her, then another one, and they can't get her to stop. And they later told me they called down a senior doctor to see what was going on. He arrived very quickly. Then more people show up around her, and then they pull the curtain so I can't see what's going on over there because I'm only sitting about 15 feet away. And then I hear the doctor yell, Milinda, Milinda! And to try to wake her up, but she doesn't. And around that time, Fiona called me to see how things were going. And I told her, terrible. And she said, they'll be right back. So then I hear the doctor yell, push the red button, push the red button. And it's like, I don't know what the red button is, but I don't like the sound of that. So I finally got up to go over there to see what was going on. The nurse immediately intercepted me and put me in a nearby room and told me that they will let me know what's going on as soon as they can. And I could hear a lot of commotion outside the room. And then shortly thereafter, a nurse shows up and then a doctor come in to tell me that she is unconscious and they don't know why. So they're going to wheel her to the ER where the big CT scanner is located so they can scan her head, her chest, and her abdomen to see why she's unconscious. Then when they opened my door to take me there must have been 15 people around Milinda's bed, and they were all frantic. Things did not look good. So then I'm taken along with them where they get her right into the CT room, and I waited outside. They came and let me know that they'll come back in about 20 minutes after all the scans are finished and let me know what they find. Well, the doctor came back in about 3 minutes, and he told me that she has a brain bleed. And it's a bad one. I don't know what that is. So I asked the doctor, well, what do you do about that? And he tells me there's nothing they can do. So I asked the doctor, I said, do you mean she's going to die? And he said, yes. So I asked the doctor, how long does she have? And he said, well, that's hard to say. So I asked the doctor, it's like, well, does that mean 20 minutes or a week? And he said, well, probably a day or two. Oh my God. So they take me back up to the orthopedic ward where I am reunited with John and Fiona, and I share the bad news. And shortly thereafter, the hospital chaplain shows up, and her name is Donna. Our chaplain here at Trains is La Donna. And I guess since God couldn't send me La Donna, he sent Donna instead. She was very sweet and prayed for me and spent quite a bit of time with us that day. I'm going to say that was God was with us number 6. So in the picture here, you can see is John, Donna, and Fiona. Then next, God sends me a social worker, Grace. How appropriate. God sends me Grace. I'm going to say that is God is with me, number 7. Grace introduces herself and tells me she is here to provide emotional support. That's good. Well, the words emotional support are trigger words for me that remind me when I had my gallbladder taken out a couple of years ago that was malignant. So Grace asked me if there's anything she can do for me, and I tell her yes. I could really use an emotional support hamster. And poor Grace, she just looks at me like, hmm? And before she has a chance to really think about it or respond, another social worker shows up to talk to me about some paperwork and insurance and whatnot. And Grace excuses herself to tell me she will be back shortly. And Grace comes back with Windsor. This is Windsor. Hi, everybody. It's a little Thai stuffed hamster. Oh my God. Here he is. God is definitely letting me know that he is here again, number 8. And I'm going to explain why that's so significant. Well, the words emotional support, like I said before, are trigger words. And when I had my gallbladder taken out, my first follow-up appointment was at Emory. And I met with a woman at Emory who was their emotional support coordinator. Now, I don't mean to offend anybody here on what I'm going to say, but I had gallbladder cancer. The doctors told me that the cancer was within the center 25% of my gallbladder, which is stage 1. It wasn't halfway into my gallbladder, 3/4 of my gallbladder, all the way out, or into the bile ducts or anything else. So being the optimistic person that I am, I was 100% confident that when they took my gallbladder out, they also took out the cancer. So anyway, so I'm meeting with the emotional support coordinator lady at Emory, and she tells me, I want to tell you some of the benefits that we offer to you as a cancer patient. And I'm like, okay. And she said, well, first of all, we can send somebody over to clean your house 2 times. And I said, well, I really don't need that because I have a Milinda. And besides that, Milinda has a lady that comes over and cleans our house anyway. So I really don't need that. They said, well, the second thing we can do is provide transportation services to bring you to your follow-up appointments. And I say, well, I'm feeling pretty good. And I drove myself here this morning. And plus, I have a Milinda, so I think I'm good on that too. And she said, well, we also have financial assistance. And I said, well, I've got Kaiser insurance, which seems to be pretty good. And whatever the deductible is, I can probably handle paying that too. So then she said, well, is there anything else that I might be able to help you with? And in the spur of the moment, I thought, yes, if you could get me an emotional support hamster, I think that's what I would really need. And the lady just looks at me and she's all serious and she's like, and then I start laughing and I'm like, I'm just kidding. And then she started laughing and was relieved that I guess I wasn't serious. So anyway, so later, a couple weeks later, Milinda and I went to Cracker Barrel for lunch. And we had to wait. And Milinda was milling around in the Cracker Barrel store and she went over to the toy department. And she comes over with this little guy. And Milinda says, maybe this would be good for you as your emotional support hamster. And I'm like, that would be awesome. So I named him Esh for emotional support hamster. So anyway, the next time that we went for my follow-up to Emory, I took Esh with me, put him right there in my shirt pocket like that. Well, probably hit the mechanical part. But anyway, I went in and I was dying to see the emotional support coordinator lady, but as it turns out, believe it or not, she had quit. So anyway, the nurses were there. So I explained to the nurses that I had got an emotional support hamster and I was feeling so much better because I had Esh now. And they got a big kick out of it. Then I met with the cancer surgeon that took my gallbladder out. He's telling me about all the chemotherapy that they're going to do and all this other crap. And so I said, hey, by the way, doctor, here's Esh. I got him. He's my emotional support hamster. And he just looked at me and then just kept talking about the chemo stuff. It just kind of went over his head. So I also have a picture there. You can see Esh and Windsor. They're both with Mr. Duck. So the emotional support hamster that Grace brought me, his name is Windsor, by the way. So you can see there was Grace and Windsor, and that was awesome. What is the chance that I could be on the other side of the world and I crack a joke with the emotional support coordinator and she has a hamster in her office? So I didn't think about it at the time, but the next day when I saw her, I said, Grace, where did you get that? Where did you get Windsor from? And she said, well, I also provide emotional support for the pediatric unit. And about a year ago, a person came in with this big bag full of all these little Thai stuffed animals for the children to give them as a toy, for coming to the hospital. And all of us that were there thought they were so cute. So the person says, okay, why don't each one of you pick one of those for yourself? And Grace, a year ago, picked the hamster. How can that be? So anyway, so after all that, they wheeled Milinda back up to her room in the orthopedic ward. And I'm given time to say goodbye to her. I don't know if she could hear me or not since she was unconscious. But I told her how much I enjoyed our life together, that I loved her, and I would look forward to seeing her again in heaven someday. I also read her the message and the Bible verses that Ella Meadows sent me that I had on my phone. If you look closely, you can see I left Windsor there with her in her hand. And afterwards, Fiona, John, and myself went downstairs to grab a bite to eat and took a break. So during this time, Fiona tells me that she has a friend, Sharon, who manages a funeral home and asks if she would like me to call her. So I asked her, I said, does she do cremations as well? And she said she did. So I said, that would be great. So here is God again. Number 9, what's the chances that the lady that I'm with as my tour guide has a connection with a funeral home that does cremations? So afterwards, Fiona and John and I went back upstairs and we were waiting for the police to show up since the next step in the process was to fill out a police report. Well, they waited with me until 9 o'clock that night, and I finally called it and said, I guess the police aren't coming. They probably won't come until the morning. So they took me back to the hotel and dropped me off. Then, at 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings in my hotel. So I answer it. It's the police. They need me to come to the hospital like now at 1 o'clock in the morning. And apparently the rules in New Zealand are you have to do this stuff. They can't leave until they talk to me. So I call good old Fiona, 1 o'clock in the morning. And she said, oh, I was just getting ready to go to bed. I'll come over and pick you up. So she comes over, picks me up. I do the police report. She's with me till 3 o'clock in the morning. Takes me back to the hotel. She is definitely an angel. Thank you, Fiona. So the next morning is the 21st of May. Fiona and John come to the hotel and pick me up and take me to the hospital to finalize everything. And later that day, the senior doctor, who they called the doctor boss, called a family meeting. Well, I'm the family. So the doctor boss gets everybody in the room. There were many people. There was there was himself. There was another doctor. There was the nurse in charge of Milinda. I think there was another nurse. There was Donna, the chaplain. There was Grace, the social worker. There was John, Fiona, myself, and a couple other people just for why not. So the doctor said he went around to have everybody in the room introduce themselves and what they did. And the mood in the room obviously was very distraught, very somber. All those people did not want to be in there with me, especially under these bizarre circumstances. So anyway, we went around the room and introduced everybody. And when they got to me, I was looking straight at the boss doctor, and I introduced myself as Dr. Weberschneiber. And I'm also known as Scott Griggs. And the facial expression of disbelief on the senior doctor was precious. And I totally caught him off guard. He said, "Are you really a doctor?" And I burst out laughing and I said, "Of course not." And the rest of the room Everybody else burst out laughing. And it totally changed the mood of the room and relaxed everybody. And I'm going to call that God is with me number 9, because I literally thought of doing that when they said, it's your turn, Scott. So after that, he had me tell the story of what happened in my own words, even though he said he pretty much knew what happened, because he wanted to make sure it was right for the medical report, and especially so he could categorize everything as an accident, including the angiogram. So that meant no expense to me. So I'm going to call that God is with me number 10, because he could have not cared. So then he went on to explain the process to confirm that Milinda was really brain dead before they disconnected all the life support machines. And he said part of that process is 2 doctors independently verify that there is no response from the body when you do crazy things, like poke somebody in the eye with a Q-tip. Because if your body's working, even if you're unconscious, your body is gonna, have that reaction to like, oh my God, it poked a Q-tip in my eye. And there were 3 or 4 other things, and I'm not going to tell you what they were because it was pretty gross. So anyway, he asked me if I wanted to go in, and the rules are the first doctor goes through all these things and pretty much verifies, yes, she's dead. And then the second doctor goes in and does all the stuff again to double make sure that she's dead, because needless to say, they don't want to make sure she's still alive and turn her off. And so he asked me if I wanted to go with the second doctor, and it's like, ugh, I really don't want to, but I guess I'm curious to see what that's all about, so I agreed to. So the second doctor did the procedure, and when she was finished and there was no response from Milinda's body to any of the things that she did, including turning off her oxygen, which was the last thing, and they monitor it when the CO2 level gets up to a certain number that your body should start gasping for air, and that didn't happen either. So that's when they recorded her official time of death on Wednesday, May 21st. I also told previously the hospital staff that Milinda was an organ donor. And since her body was going to be cremated, she would be happy to donate anything from her earth suit, because she's not going to need that in heaven. So they called the Northeast Georgia Medical Center and verified that with her breast cancer, they didn't want to take any chances with her organs that may still have some cancer lurking there. But the eye bank people definitely wanted her eyes. They were so grateful. And they said so few people are willing to do that. And that her 2 beautiful eyes could give this eyesight to up to 6 people. I didn't know that. That's going to be a God moment for some people. Well, since then, I got an email from the eye bank people, and they told me that they transplanted her corneas. So far. And that gave the gift of sight to a 70-year-old man and a 30-year-old woman. And they're still going to use the white part of her eye to help other people. So Fiona and John then dropped me off at the hotel later that day, and I had dinner with Windsor. So I had now it's Thursday, May 22nd. I had my usual breakfast at the George Hotel, and John came by and picked me up to spend the entire day with me. Fiona said it would be good if it was just a man day. It's like, whatever. So we drove around and took in some more sights, and then we went to Sumner Beach for a great lunch. And then we drove around some more, and we just talked and talked and talked. And then we ended up at Hagley Park and walked around for a while and had a coffee. And then after that, it was time for dinner. So John took us downtown Christchurch, and we had a great dinner. And then he took me back and dropped me off at the hotel. I'm going to call this God Was With Me number 11, because John was such an awesome person, an awesome listener, and has a really cool life experience as well. He just pulled my chain on, tell me more about your train business. So anybody that knows me, if you want me to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, just ask me about the train business and then ask me a bunch of follow-up questions. And I must have talked about the train business for 4 hours. I don't know, I probably drove the poor guy crazy, but he was very interested. And then he told me about his career and worldwide managing IT companies, which was pretty awesome, and all the countries he lived in and the huge clients he had. It was really neat. So Friday, I get up. It's now Friday, May 23rd. This was finally my go shopping for a New Zealand sweater day, because that was one of the things I wanted to do in New Zealand. So I bought a trolley pass, how cool, and enjoyed stops along the way. And I got a Kraken spiced rum and Coke with my gorilla friends, you can see there. Got some gelato, and then I had lunch. Oh, and I did get a merino possum wool sweater, a couple t-shirts, some other stuff. And then later that afternoon, Carrie and Fiona picked me up for dinner. That dinner lasted from 7 o'clock to 11. I don't think I've ever had a 4-hour dinner before. They got me a nice card and some small gifts to remember them. How could I forget? So Saturday morning, good old Fiona came by and picked me up again, and we went to Academy Funeral, and there was Sharon, her friend, who had expeditiously handled the cremation and had Milinda's ashes all ready to go in a hermetically sealed urn, all the paperwork to travel with, and 6 copies of her death certificate. And she did all that in 3 days. I'm going to call that God is With Me number 12. I don't know how long that's supposed to take, but I don't think normally you get it done in 3 days. Oh, and then also thanks to the ACC insurance, the cremation services and all that was also covered by ACC. So I'm going to call that God is With Me number 13. Then, how could I not visit a model train store when I found there was a nice one there in Christchurch? So Fiona took me there too. And it was really cool. And I met with the owner and I told him about buying and selling collectible trains because he just sold new trains. And he seemed to be pretty excited about that, and I think is going to do it. So I had a good time chatting with him and checking out his store. It was really nice. I especially liked the counter there with the railroad tracks inlaid in it. It was pretty neat. And then Fiona took me to dinner to another cool place, and then took me back to the hotel. So Sunday morning, I went back to the shopping market for something. I can't remember why. But on the way back to my hotel, I walked by a card shop. I didn't stop. But then about 15 minutes later, it occurred to me, I should stop and get Fiona and Carrie a card. They got me one. So I turned around, went back to the card shop and bought 2 blank cards. And then back at the hotel room, I wrote each of them a gushing, heartfelt, handwritten thank you note for all they did for me. And I also decorated the outsides of the envelope in Scott style that I'm showing you there. Milinda got most of those cards, but occasionally a special person in my life also got the special Scott decorated envelopes. But then I wanted also to give them something, and since I wasn't smart enough to think about buying them a gift when I was out shopping, I saw the pile of jewelry and bracelets of Milinda's, and it dawned on me why Milinda kept buying all these bracelets. You know, she's not an octopus, but she's probably got a couple hundred of them. And God told me all those bracelets are for me to give away to Melinda's friends. I was like, that's a cool idea. So in Carrie's card, I put 2 bracelets, one for her and one for her daughter, Ruby. And I put another one and the other card to Fiona for her. I'm going to say this is God's inspiration number 14. Then both Fiona and Carrie picked me up at the hotel and got me to the airport at 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon, 3 hours early. I went to check in with Qantas and they asked me if I had an Australian visa. Of course, I didn't. So they said, no problem, it's easy. You just download this app and it will create one for you. Except it wasn't working. It wouldn't upload my picture. So finally, I kept trying and trying and trying. So like after 50 times, it finally worked. But that was 10 minutes after the boarding ended. And that was good because Carrie and Fiona were all wound up trying to figure out how to get me on an alternate flight back home. And you can see here's Carrie and Fiona at the airport with me. So they took me back to the hotel and said they'd be back to pick me up to catch the 6:00 a.m. flight on Monday. And then I could still make my connection from Sydney to get to LA to get to Atlanta. Ugh, all in one day, sort of. So who shows up to pick me up at the hotel at 3 a.m.? Yeah, both of them. Then after 3 flights and about 20 hours in the air, I made it home. So the 15th God is with me was Fiona, who I spent the most time with, and she was a Christian. I realized later how much we talked about God, death, heaven, Milinda's life and I together, obviously. And if she wasn't a Christian, how difficult those conversations would have been for me to share all that. I assume Carrie and John are Christians as well, but I really didn't have those conversations with them. So thank you, Fiona, for being who you are and everything you did for me, and how you just unselfishly spent so much time. And of course, I know Carrie and John did as well, and I appreciate them dramatically as well. So as you can tell, for all those people that wanted to know, how did you make it by yourself in New Zealand? I was not alone. Thank you to all my friends in New Zealand. Thank you for God putting all of them in place and for all the circumstances that made it very clear to me that God was with me. Thank you.